Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this webinar about SharePoint. I'm Ben Woodthorpe. I'm going to introduce you to the team and then we'll talk about how we're going to run this webinar. In this session, I've got Ben Karst, who's with me. Ben can't unfortunately talk because he's going to be doing the chat window in the background and he's got his little daughter because he's working from home. But we've also got Ed. If you want to say a little word.
Hi, I'm okay.
So Ed's going to be the voice of the audience and he's going to be looking at the chat window as well, and he's going to be sort of asking your questions on your behalf, and I'll mention a little bit more about how that chat window works in a moment. He's going to play devil's advocate a little bit with us, and I've also got Mark in here who is our SharePoint expert. Mark, if you want to introduce yourself.
Morning, everyone.
Brilliant. And finally, last but not least, we've also got Quinton in here. Quinton is from a company called Data, and Quinton is an expert when it comes to the infrastructure side and the licensing side. He's going to also be looking at the question and answers, help us out with that. And he's also got a nice little offer that he's going to talk about from Microsoft a little bit later on in the webinar that could benefit all of you. So if I could just pass over to Quinton to say hello.
Good morning. Hi. Hope everybody's safe and well.
Brilliant. And that, do you know what? That's a really good point, Quinton. I hope everyone is, dealing well with all of the social distancing and keeping safe in this really, really crazy time. And I don't know if you saw that slide that came up before. We're all very, very grateful for what everyone's doing to keep the country going. Brilliant. Okay. So we'll talk about the content that we're going to go through today. I'm going to sort of pass over to Mark for this because he's more the expert when it comes to SharePoint. So Mark, if you want to explain the areas that we're going to go through for everyone, please.
Yes, certainly. So we're going to look at what SharePoint is. We're then going to move on to, within SharePoint, what a document library is and how that can be useful for sharing with colleagues and also people outside your organisation. After the break, we'd then be looking at using lists within SharePoint as a way of capturing data from members of staff. We'll look at how this all hooks in with Office 365. We'll look at pages and we'll look at permissions. In fact, I think we've moved the looking at pages higher up the list. I think we're going to do what is SharePoint, then pages, then document libraries.
Yeah, all of this is my bad. We made a subtle change to the running order before we ran this webinar, and Ben didn't update the slides, so apologies for that. So yeah, slightly different running order, but we're going to go through all of that content. How the webinar is going to work is Mark's going to demonstrate, the particular feature or function in SharePoint. I'm going to sort of pitch in with that a little bit, but Mark is the expert when it comes to SharePoint. Every so often we won't necessarily pause for Q&A specifically, but if you ask us questions and we've got a moment, we'll have a little bit of a look what's been asked and we will try and answer it on air. We've got at the moment, just have a look at the attendee list. I think we've got 71 people. So pretty good attendance. We're not going to be able to answer every single question. We'll try our best. Now, how you can ask a question. Now, you'll have to excuse my really rank amateur skills with graphics here, but can you see there's that little flashing Q&A button? Take the time on your copy of Zoom to kind of look around the screen, depending on what you're looking at us on, whether it be a tablet or a computer. You'll see a button that looks a little bit like that. If you click on that, that's your mechanism to ask us questions. So it's a little bit like a WhatsApp chat or a text message. You just type in what you want to ask. We won't answer it there and then, but we will at certain points take a moment to have a little bit of a look and try and answer live on air, or Ben or Ed or Quinton might pick up the questions as we go. We'll try our best to get through all of this. One thing to mention to you is, if you ask the question, we are recording this webinar, and this is another thing to mention. Afterwards, we will send you a recording. So if you ask a question and you actually don't want some aspect of that question to become public, well, it's being recorded. So just keep your questions fairly generic, don't mention anything specific. It will get published in this, webinar recording, but do feel free to ask any question you want, and we'll try our best to sort of help you with that. Okay, so what we'll start off with is we'll have a little bit of a look at what SharePoint is. So Mark, do you want to sort of hit off and sort of give your opinion on what you see SharePoint is and what it can do for people roughly?
Yeah, so SharePoint covers a multitude of things. A lot of companies use it as a way of creating an intranet so that each team can have their own page, and that can be either an internal page for that team to see what's going on, what projects are coming up, or it can be an externally facing team for the whole company to show what this particular department is doing. But it covers a lot more than that. There is an area where we can store documents, so we can use it in the same ways we would a traditional file storage unit. We can also capture data using it. And there's a whole host of things that we'll go through as we look at the SharePoint site that we've got in place.
Brilliant. And you mentioned intranet. I mean, we in Woodthorpe IT, we obviously go out and deliver SharePoint training. We tend to use it mainly for file sharing. What are your thoughts on sort of OneDrive, etc. with SharePoint?
So OneDrive and SharePoint go hand in hand. If you think of most companies, traditionally you would have a personal drive where stuff that you save on that is backed up by the IT admin, and that is where you put your files that are only for you to use. You've then got your network drives where you would put files and multiple people would be able to see those. And again, that's where SharePoint comes in. So the document library in there would be somewhere that you would put files, and the people who have permission to see that SharePoint site, they would be able to see that.
Brilliant. And just to pull quickly Quinton into this conversation, obviously Quinton works in a company that is all to do with IT support, and he's got a broader perspective on how a lot of organizations use document storage, intranets, etc. Just sort of briefly, Quinton, how do you kind of see SharePoint from your perspective?
I see SharePoint as an extremely powerful tool, and it's another complementary service. But it's really the key thing is understanding the needs and requirements of a business and actually tailoring then a solution around that. So what type of solution fits one organization may not fit another. But the key thing is that you also can have a hybrid. So you can have the virtues of having local storage because you have a high concentration of users at one location, but also then using SharePoint for potentially business continuity or to service external users. It's really down to each organizational needs and requirements really help specify the road or the route that you go down.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll get on to some practical stuff pretty quick, sharp, everyone, just to let you know. But we just wanted to make sure we framed what we think SharePoint is. I suppose really, and I've got a question I want to ask Mark in a moment that's come through on the Q&As. I suppose what we're kind of saying is it's a bit of a Swiss Army knife for collaboration, really, isn't it?
It is. So it has so many different features, and we're only going to really scratch the surface of what we can do with SharePoint in this little session today.
Brilliant. So look, I know Mark and Ed, you've answered this on the chat window. One question before we move on to doing some practical stuff, which is kind of what you're all here for. Anonymous attendee, I'm assuming that's not your full name. A little bit unfortunate. I'll call you Dave or Jane. How is it different than storing files in Teams? Okay. And we've also got David as well mentioning pretty much the same question. Compared to Teams, what is the main difference? I mean, I'll say my uneducated answer to this because I know Teams, but not SharePoint as well. They are one in the same. Teams actually sits on top of SharePoint, but for a more educated answer, let me pass you over to Mark, the expert for that one.
Yeah, so Teams is a front end and SharePoint is the back end of where the files go. So when you save files and you upload them into Teams, they go and live then in SharePoint. So there are some features that you will see that we can only do through SharePoint that we can't do via just the Teams application.
Yeah. So I suppose it's you know, as soon as you build a team in Teams, it creates a SharePoint site, which is the back end to your team. I must admit, I love Teams. For me, Teams does what I need it to do. But when you get a bit more complex with what you want to do, and, you know, Mark's set up some examples here, there's all sorts you can do in SharePoint around approvals of documents. You can work with lists and all sorts of clever things that you can build into SharePoint. Well, if you've started something in Microsoft Teams, you can extend it in SharePoint, and it all kind of rolls in together, doesn't it?
It does. So within Teams itself, you've got the ability to go to where the SharePoint site is that's linked to that team. And then once you're there, everything that we're going to show you in this session is accessible to you.
Brilliant. Smashing.
I'd just like to add, sorry, I'd want to add one thing. Is if you could visualize what is SharePoint. SharePoint is a bit like Lego. It basically, you buy a box, and we're going to have a click through about what it looks like, but it's really limited down to your imagination. And that's what Lego is that you enable you to make anything you want to do. And within SharePoint, it gives you that kind of platform.
I like that.
It does indeed, yeah.
I like that, Quinton. I'm going to steal that and use that myself.
Let me slide now.
Very last question, Joanne, and then we will move on to the practical stuff. Will there be something on some training on Teams? Unfortunately, you've kind of missed it, but what we'll do when I send out the and we'll probably do another one in the future, to be honest, but we've done a couple of Teams webinar sessions. I'll send you the video to the SharePoint course that we're doing now, but also on a separate email, I'll send anyone who's registered for this webinar a video link to the Teams session as well, so you can benefit from that as well. And feel free, you know, outside of this, you know, ask us any questions via email if you want about Teams, and we'll always do our best to help you. But look, I'm going to pass over to Mark. I'm going to stop boring you all with my voice talking about, well, hot air, and let's get Mark to actually show some cool things you can do in SharePoint.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So we are currently on the welcome screen that you get when you log into Office 365. Now, when I go to SharePoint and I click on it, that takes me to a page, and it's very similar to when you go into Word or Excel. It's showing you places that you've recently been. So these sites that we've got here, and you'll notice Ben has favorited some of these sites. So these ones will stay on it. It's the equivalent of pinning. Now, not everyone within your organization will have access to the same SharePoint sites. So if someone was to search within the search bar for a site, so I'm going to search for Mark's example site, for you it may come up, but for somebody else, if they haven't got permission to see that site, it wouldn't appear in their list. So if I take us to the site that we're going to demo today. So out of the box, when you create a SharePoint site, you get this sort of welcome screen. So this is your home page for the SharePoint site. And they all look the same. We've got an area where we can add news articles. We've got quick links. We've got a document window and an activities panel. But if you can use some desktop publishing skills, you can change this. You can press on the edit button. And all these panels, they are movable and editable. So if I didn't want a certain panel, as an example, I could just press the delete button. If I want to move a panel to make it more prominent, I can click on it. I can go to the move web part, and I can drag it to a place where I want it to be. And
that, sorry to kind of sort of butt in with you, Mark. That's really good. I mean, I do some work in WordPress, web development stuff. I'm terrible at it, but I do use it. And this editor that they've got in here is brilliant because, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, what you're actually doing there is you kind of, I know this is internal, but at the moment anyway, you're building a web page, aren't you?
You are, without having to know any HTML or any other more advanced web creation code.
Yeah, and like we're kind of framing this as being an internal. So look, I know, I think I saw some names in the list, and I can see there's someone who we've worked with in the past who's at a school. So, for instance, you could have an internal intranet, which is all to do with staff stuff. And we won't really get too far to get into this, but you could build a SharePoint site which is public facing, can't you, Mark?
You can indeed.
Yeah.
So when you go to create the SharePoint site, which we skipped that bit, but if I went and did create site, it gives you some choices. So you've got a team site and you've got a communication site. What we're actually running on is a team site that actually links into Microsoft Teams. And when you're in Teams and you go to create a new team, it asks you, do you have an existing SharePoint site you want to link it to? That only works if it's a team site. The communication site is more of an externally facing one. So that might be something where you put on there that, you know, I've done this for a few places where that's almost been like a main site that everyone goes to, and this links off that to take people to the specific sites they've got permission to. That doesn't link to Teams though.
So there's a couple of questions coming from Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous. We'll come back to them in a bit. We're just going to do a few more bits on what Mark's talking about now with the pages, and then we'll come back to those questions. So we're not ignoring you. So sorry, I interjected there, Mark. Do you want to carry on?
So yeah, if I go back to the site, so moving it around and adding bits and pieces, you can quite quickly change it from looking like it did. I'm going to do a bit of a Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier. So this was like 10, 15 minutes of me messing about, taking some graphics that we had, and I've just now changed that to be a more sort of easier structure. We've got a link to get to documents, a link to get to reporting our faults, access to the Teams area. We've even then got links to our remote heroes and our YouTube page. And that didn't take me long at all to create.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some... this is literally 5 minutes of Mark's time to do this, and 5 minutes of me picking out a few images. And if you take your time, there's some incredible stuff you can do with this. I mean, you can really... I mean, if I just pull Ed in. So Ed is obviously we're all trainers in this, apart from Quinton, who's sort of hardcore infrastructure, sort of IT support side. But before Ed was delivering training for us, you used to work at a council, didn't you, Ed? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, I used to work in the communications team of the council, so that included internal and external communication. And we had an intranet site, and it was very, very old school. And anytime anyone wants to change anything on that intranet, so each team would have like their own site, and we'd communicate what sort of projects we were working on, things like that, big important projects throughout the whole council. And every time we wanted to make a change, we'd have to go to a special team. There was like, you know, they were the gatekeepers. There was like 2 or 3 people that worked in that team, and it would take them 2 or 3 weeks to actually put this new stuff on the website, which is just such a horrible system. This way with SharePoint, I would have loved this back then, because we could put on like news, we could update news all the time. If something new was going on, we could update it all the time. Very simple login, doesn't take an awful lot of knowledge. You don't need the HTML and all that kind of web development stuff in the background to be able to do this. You just go on there, whack on a news story, add a picture if you want to. It's just as simple as doing a Word document or anything like that. Stick it on there, and then boom, it's done. Yeah. That's just the communication side of it, not to mention all the file sharing and all that kind of stuff we're going to talk about later, but just creating a really simple intranet to communicate internally within your organization, be that a small one or a big one. This is brilliant.
Yeah. And let's be honest, not to do anyone out of work. Sometimes this is the kind of thing you end up going out to market, finding someone to build for you, spending thousands of pounds on. And I'm not saying you don't need a little bit of help here or there, but it kind of puts the power of building something like this into your hands. You know, you can maintain it yourself. You know, it's really good what Microsoft has done.
Once it's all set up and you've got like the permission side of things right, and got people who know what they're doing at each site, it does make life so much easier. You're not having to rely on these other teams to get round to doing what you've asked them to do. You can have a champion in each department who can do it.
Brilliant. Right, I'm just going to, one question that is relevant to what we're talking about, we'll go back to the Teams related questions. Darren Crisp has asked, and this kind of makes a bit of sense to me, but just to ask you, Mark, with old style SharePoint on premise, it used to be the case that an administrator was needed. Do you think that is necessary with SharePoint Online, or would you let nominated user manage internally?
I would let nominated users manage internally, to be honest.
What would you say about that, Quinton? Oh,
Sorry, I had the microphone off. I think each organisation is different. I think it's very difficult to say a global statement on anything. There's another conversation which we can't really handle today, which is about security. But it's each organisation's different, and you'll handle it in that way rather than just saying this is the way how to do it.
Yeah, and I suppose it's down to skill level, isn't it? And yeah, definitely. And one last question, and we will come back to the teams related questions that were asked before. Joanne's asked, if you edit the site page, does this change for everyone who has access to the site, or just change for you?
For everyone.
Boom. There you go. Like it. Nice, simple answer. Right then. So. Is there anything else you want to show us on pages, Mark? Or
no, on pages, I think we're pretty much done. So what I'm going to move on to is the document library. So this is the one that a lot of people get confused with, because they've got, well, I've got OneDrive, and my OneDrive, I can put files in there and I can share it. Why do I need this this document library that SharePoint has? Going back to my analogy of your traditional network drives, your OneDrive is your personal drive. So it's somewhere that you would put files that are by default just files you're going to work on. It gives you that ability to collaborate on these files. But if there are files that are by default always shareable and always need to be available to a group of people, the document library within SharePoint is the better place to put it. So you'll notice at the top corner of the SharePoint site, there's a little person there and it says 5 members. So the 5 people who I have added to the SharePoint site, they all have access to this document library. Any files that we upload into here, and Ben will upload a document in a few moments, is then viewable and then usable by those people. And just like within the OneDrive, these are collaborative documents, so multiple people can be in the same document at the same time.
Brilliant. Do you want me to, while you're talking, Mark, do you want me to do a bit of uploading?
Yes, so to upload a file, Ben's just going to go to his Explorer window. And just like the OneDrive, it's as easy as just highlighting the files that he wants, dragging and dropping them. And then it will tell you at the top that file is now available. And it even, just like the OneDrive does, gives you the little shiny new thing to show that that's been uploaded.
It's like the eyelash, isn't it? Almost. I don't know what you call it, but that's cool actually. Simple things for me. But
it's the new car shine.
New car shine, like it. So if I were to, presumably, again, you know, I know the answer to this, I suppose, but if I were to grab more than one item, drag it over, it's just going to stack it up, isn't it?
It will. It'll start uploading them. You can see at the top it said 5 uploaded. Because they weren't particularly big files, it didn't take long. If it takes a bit longer, you can click on the icon. It actually shows you the progress of uploading those files.
Brilliant. And so I suppose what we're trying to say here is document library is, if I get this right, Mark, a document library in a SharePoint site is it's what used to be or is still your S drive or your T drive or your shared drive in the company.
Yeah, what would be your shared drive that maybe in your department or in your team is where you would put files so everyone has access to them.
Brilliant. And I mean, really, I suppose at the moment we've got our S drive, but in a browser. And one quick question has been asked: do you know of any limitations per browser type? You know, like is Chrome better than Edge or anything like that? Or it tends to, in my experience, it seems to work pretty well all the time. What would you say on that, Mark?
It does work in most browsers. I would say probably the weakest one, if anyone's on Apple, I would say stay clear of Safari, install Chrome on your iMac and use that. If it is going to have problems, it tends to be with Safari. It's not as advanced as the other browsers that are out there.
That's all to do with like components they install, isn't it? Really.
I did that this morning. It doesn't. It wants you to download the desktop app as much as possible, rather than going through the web apps.
Yeah, brilliant.
I have Chrome anyway on my MacBook. Something I was going to ask as a voice of the people. Can you open one of those files? And there's just one thing that I've shown 2 or 3 people recently, and it's blown their mind, and it's so simple, and they just don't realize you can do it.
Just open it in the browser itself.
Yeah. Because people realize you can get into it, and then you can do stuff, you can work on it, and that's all fantastic. But then they're like, well, I want to be able to open that in the desktop app because the web app is a little bit more limited.
Yeah.
And they don't realize there's a button up there that says open in desktop app, and you can do that. It'll open up in Excel on your computer. And then when you save it and close it, it will save it back into SharePoint, won't it? I'm right.
It will indeed.
Yeah, exactly. So you can just open it and use it in your normal desktop app as you would normally. As soon as you close it and share it, it's still saved in SharePoint, and you're all good.
Yeah, but if you go back a step to the online version, we should minimise that, Mark. So that's really good if you want to work sort of in the full Coke version of Excel or Word or PowerPoint, whatever you're in. This online version is awesome for collaborative editing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's better for collaborative editing than the desktop app. So with the desktop app, there's a bit of a lag. So if someone is using the web-based version and then the other person is using the desktop version, there is issues sometimes where it would actually wipe out some of the data that the web-based person has put in when the desktop one refreshes.
Yeah, brilliant.
I've actually found this really, sorry, go back to that spreadsheet again. I found this really, we did this in another session. I found this really powerful, so we can actually have multiple people working on the same document at the same time. And that is really, really powerful, especially when so many of us are now distantly working, because we're presenting this and we're all over the country. But what you're able to do is have people looking at the same cells and making amendments to our spreadsheet in real time and working together, as you would be if you was working in an office.
Yeah, it's brilliant for that. It's really good for that. It is fabulous. And this is sort of thing that a few years ago you'd be like, what? I can do that? Now it's just there. And, you know, half the time, most people have got this in their organisation. They don't even know they've got it. They don't even know they're paying for it, you know. Just to pull back a little bit. So we've got a document library, which is the replacement for a shared drive.
Yeah.
Or complementary.
Or complementary.
Or complementary, yeah. Can you talk to some of the advantages, Mark, in terms of, versioning maybe? The fact that you don't have to go in mega detail, the fact you can sync. There's a couple of questions being asked around, would you create a document library to replace every network drive, or would you do it both by folder department? I suppose really talking about the flexibility of it as well.
Again, it's a bit like the question of the admin and that would be on a company by company basis. It might be for some companies that, yes, we make multiple document libraries in the same SharePoint site. Probably the better option would be to have a separate SharePoint site for each network drive. And then that way it's a bit easier to handle the permission side of things.
Yeah. I mean, we
was going to talk about things like alerts and things of that nature.
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry to I'm a right gobby one eye. I'm sorry about this, Mark. In One Up IT, we do it per kind of function. We've got a marketing site, we have a learning hub, we have an admin hub. And we kind of keep our admin stuff in one place, keep all of our marketing material in another. And in one instance, they might have been one shared drive with 3 folders, but I do it that way so that I can kind of assign permissions to people based on their job function, rather than just saying, well, you get the T drive, if you see what I mean. So, sorry, Mark, I butted in. You were still talking about the versioning, etc.
Yeah. So I'll get to versioning towards the end of this little section. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that just like your OneDrive, you can actually set up an active sync of this. So you would have a network drive, or you would have an area on your File Explorer that mirrors this area. You would just press the word sync at the top, and then just let it go through the stages.
And this actually, Andrew Forster, has asked this very question about, can we store files locally? Yeah. So this is kind of what Mark's showing you now.
So then it works like OneDrive or Dropbox or Google Drive.
It actually works. It uses the OneDrive software. Yeah. So once that's set up, in Ben's File Explorer.
Do you want me to go? If I go in, let me go and open something for you. In fact, what it'll kind of do, it'll create like a little cloud, won't it, at the bottom on the, here we go.
Should create on that on that left-hand side even. Do you want to do that? Cause
it's fiddly for you, isn't it? Let me just...
This works really well because, especially if you've got a high concentration of users at one location, they're going to have a much better working experience if they're accessing files locally off a centralized depository or centralized server. But if you've got a distributed workforce, then using SharePoint via website is going to give them the best access as well. So it's a very, very powerful and very, very flexible. And again, it's about understanding each organization's needs and requirements to finding out what is the best solution. Is it a true web-based portal system, or is it a case of having a hybrid scenario?
Yeah. And can you see, do you remember earlier on we're talking about, what do you do, one SharePoint site per drive or per function? Do you remember I was saying to you, we have an admin, look, customer work, learning portal, marketing hub. There is the SharePoint site that Mark's just synchronized. If I go into there, can you see there's all the files? And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, what OneDrive does by default at the moment, as of probably about 6-9 months ago, it uses files on demand, doesn't it?
It does. So the icons that you see there are purely icons. Whilst you've got an internet connection, if someone was to double click on one of them, it would download that file at that point in time. So if you are going to be like, although none of us are going to be doing it at the moment, getting on a train and going somewhere, you can open the files that you want to work on. It will keep you a local copy of those files. Then when you then get an internet connection, you can then it will take those and upload them to the cloud-based version.
It's all automatic as well. So
you don't have to do anything. It does it all itself.
So this just to be clear on this, because to answer the question that was asked before about offline stuff, files on demand, like Mark says, what it does, it downloads something that looks like the file. So think as if you've got a really small laptop with maybe no storage space, you're really struggling for space. You're going to want to use files on demand because you want to see all the files, be able to open them, and they only get downloaded when you double click on them. And it synchronizes when you make any changes, all that kind of jive. So it keeps in check. Really, really good. But if you want to keep all of these files offline, you can disable files on demand. And what then it does, it just downloads everything. So provided you've got a lot of space for that, the whole shebang's there. And any changes you make, it synchronizes back, doesn't it, Mark?
It does. It as long as you've got an internet connection for it to keep it up to date, it will be as up to date as what's on the cloud.
Yeah. And so if I move away from this folder here, shall we have a look at one of the pièce de la résistance with the versions and stuff in here?
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to come to versions. The first thing I'm going to do is, especially now as we're all working remotely, it's annoying having to keep messaging people and saying, have you updated that file? Have you done those changes? Have you put those sales figures in for me? One of the really good things with the SharePoint side of things is we can set up what's called alert me's. So this duplicates file, if I go to the 3 dots here, I can go in and I can set up what's called an alert me. So within there, it just comes up with the name of the document library, name of the file, and it's going to email, in this case, Ben, if there are any changes that are made to that document. But that also includes if Ben makes a change. So you can actually downgrade that so it only notifies you if someone else makes a change. Now, the bottom two options, I tend to use those more on folders. So if there was a folder that had several files in, rather than doing an alert on a file-by-file basis, I would do it at the folder level if the files were ones that I created or they were files that I was last person to modify. Now, that will send an immediate notification to Ben, literally about 30 seconds after someone has left the file, to say that it's been changed. Or if you've done it on a folder, as people upload files, it will tell you for each file that's uploaded. So that could become a bit of a pain that you get in these notifications. If someone uploads 100 files, you'll get 100 notifications. So what you can do is you can change that to getting a daily summary report, and you can then choose what time of the day that comes through at. Or you might just want to be kept up to date on a weekly basis, so you choose the day and the time.
I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, like we've done work for a couple of reasonably big retailers, and they'll have like 30, 40 shops in a region. And at the end of the day, they upload some data to do with the daily sales, the weekly sales from the POS system to like a SharePoint site. And the accounts team then go in and do some work on it to sort of turn it into something. And just having that notification rather than having to continually check and chase people, brilliant. I mean, you don't get that if you're just using vanilla file shares, really, do you?
No. And it's not a feature that you'd be able to initiate from Teams as well. You've got to physically go onto the SharePoint side of things to then turn that on. Once it's on, you'll get a notification. Have you got an email there that shows what the notification looks like, Ben?
Just going to grab 1 second. I've messed up all my folders on the other screen, so just bear with me 1 second while I get to where I need to
Okay,
be.
So while you're finding that, am I all right to control on this screen while you're...
No. It's a one-shot deal. Which one do you want me to open? An alert?
The one showing the notification, so the alert me one.
Right, okay. So this is sorry for the delay there, everyone. I'm just going to open this email. So this is an example of an email alert that was sent from the SharePoint site that Mark set up, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So whenever there's a change made to that particular file, Ben will get an alert telling him that there's been a change. Now, if you decide at a later date, actually, you don't need notifying about that particular file or folder anymore, we can just simply go... Sorry?
I'm just going to close my Outlook because opening that email actually opened my Outlook and I don't want loads of... Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
So to change an alert or to get rid of an alert, on the main toolbar at the top of your document library, you can actually press the 3 dots there, go into Manage My Alerts, and then within there, you'll see the alerts that have been set up. To edit one, you would just simply click on it, and it takes you back to the original screen we had. If you simply wanted to get rid of an alert that you don't want it anymore, you just tick the box, delete selected alert, and the job's done. Brilliant.
No, that's really, really good. So in a minute, we'll have a little bit of a break. Conscious that because I have quite a few questions, we're sort of rolling over on time a little bit. We'll carry on for everyone. Do be aware, if you do have to go, we are recording this session. You will get a recording. So if you do have to go, we won't be offended. We'll send you that recording. Don't worry. But do you want to finish off on the clever stuff with the documents library? And I'll stop interrupting you getting too excited about versions, as I've been for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to a different document library that I've done some work on. And I've actually added additional columns so I can see that there are versions of this, my first file. So it's got 6 versions. So traditionally, when you were saving to a normal network drive, you'd have probably put V1, V2, V999 at the end of a document's name to show that it was a new version. The problem with that is you can potentially open the wrong version of a document and be working on it. Within SharePoint, as you save a file, it will automatically make a new version of that document. Whatever file that you see, that is the most up-to-date version of it. But if you do want to go back and look at the historic versions, you can just float over a file, press the 3 dots, and you can go and look at the version history. So then we can see all the version numbers and the date that they were created, just simply by clicking on a particular version date. You can then choose to open that version to view it. If you'd gone off on the wrong path, so say like version 6 was wrong, we really need to go back to version 5, I can simply click where that date is, press the arrow, and I can restore that version. And that will actually make a version 7 now.
What I'd like to add here is, within SharePoint, what you have something is called file retention rather than backup.
Yeah.
So it will keep files. So if you delete a file, it will retain that file for a period of time, and then it will disappear. So please don't think that with SharePoint, your files are being backed up. That is an additional service.
Yeah. So they would all go, anything that you delete goes into that icon that says recycling bin at the bottom. The other thing that you can do within the document library, just like you can within your OneDrive is you can share those files with other people. So there may be items that you share with your team, but then you have to share with an external party. You can simply go to, it's being a bit temperamental for me, go to the share icon, press on it, and you get pretty much the same experience as you would do if you were in your OneDrive. You can choose the level of share that you're giving, so just to a specific person. You can then choose as well whether they have the ability to edit or not edit. So exactly the same as what you get within your OneDrive. As the owner of this site, there may be certain files that are more high traffic than others. And what I can do with those are, I can actually pin those to the top. So just by pressing the 3 dots, I can go pin to the top, and we get this bigger icon for the file.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, isn't it? Some of the places I've been and worked at, and they say, I'll go and do a bit of consultancy work, and they'll say, go to that drive and you're working on this file. And my word, there's a lot of files in those folders, and there's usually probably 5 that are really important. And if you could pin it to the top, it's just there, isn't it?
It is indeed. The good thing is as well, you can use filters. So if I go back to the previous one, you'll notice that in here we've got a lot of Excel files, but we've got some Word files and we've got some PowerPoints. Using the filter funnel at the side, I can filter that down to just the PowerPoint files. I could even look at when that was last modified. So I can do that from when the document library was created down to 3 months, 30 days, 7 days, yesterday, down to today.
Yeah, brilliant.
I can even look for files that were last modified by a certain person.
Smashing. That's really good. Mark, what I'm going to suggest is this a good point for me to run a very quick sort of break tip?
Yeah.
Give us a chance to have a little bit of a look through the Q&As, and then when we come back, we'll have a little bit of a look at lists and permissions. After this, everyone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you a very quick Outlook tip, something that we've recorded earlier. When we come back, Quinton's going to come on and talk about an offer that Microsoft have that might be able to save you and your organisation some money. And then we'll come along and do the last bit and wrap up. I appreciate everyone who's sticking in with us. I know we're sort of talking a bit longer than we said we would, but we'll sort of aim to wrap up in a little bit. I'm just going to run this little tip for you now, and we'll speak in a moment.
Hello.
And I've just remembered that I didn't share the sound, so bear with me 1 second, everyone, whilst I just share this properly. I do apologise for the mix-up. And here's the tip.
Hello, Ben from Woodthorpe IT Training here. Really quick tip in Outlook. If you have an email that you've written or received and you want to hear what it sounds like rather than having to read it all, we can drag over the text in the body of the email, then go to review, and there's a button here called Read Aloud. When I click it, it's going to read the text out. I'll also get a toolbar around here where I can pause and rewind what it's saying. So it's going to click here, Read Aloud.
Hi, Dave. I thought I would drop you a line to see
there's the pause button.
How you are doing.
You can also fast forward, rewind as well. So really quick tip in Outlook, if you want to see what your email message is saying, you can get Outlook to read it back to you rather than you having to read it. Ben from Woodthorpe IT Training.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to pass over to Quinton, who's going to talk about a really great offer that Microsoft have on at the moment, which might save you a little bit of money in these tough times for your company.
Hi, thanks for that. Some of you may be aware that Microsoft are offering a extended free trial of Office 365 E1. Now, this gives users a full-blown email. It also gives you Excel as a web application and Word, etc. And it's limited to hundreds of users, etc. with this E1. So where we're talking to some of our clients where they've actually prolonged some of their users, but want to do is look at ways of saving money. And so what we've been doing is implementing this, so we're able to retain all their users' emails, everything that they've created within Office 365, but also helps them to reduce some of their operational costs. Please, anybody reach out to me. I'm more than happy to look at your current Microsoft subscriptions and find out if there's some better ways of saving money, because I know quite a few organizations have retained using the same licensing they've been having for a number of years, but Microsoft keep always coming out with new products and also quite often a lot more feature rich, and again get the same functionality and saving money. So please reach out and see what we can do.
Brilliant, thank you. You have to excuse me trying to draw a smiley face, and I think Mark was trying to control the mouse as well at the same time. But if you see there pointed out Quinton's contact details, feel free to get in touch with him, and he might be able to save your organisation some money in these tough times. It's very important that you look at those sort of things, really. But no, thank you very much for going through that, Quinton.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Right, so shall we have a quick answer of some questions that have come up, then crack back on with the content, Mark?
Yeah, a couple of people asking about the documents in SharePoint and Teams. The way that it works, when you make a channel in Teams, it actually creates a document folder within your SharePoint document library. So any files that you put in there will be accessible via Teams. It does work the other way around, unfortunately, because SharePoint came first. So if you were to make a folder in SharePoint, that doesn't then automatically make a channel in Teams. So your best bet, if you want to have a collaborative area within Teams and SharePoint, build the channels in SharePoint in Teams first to then push them into SharePoint.
Brilliant. And one question that was asked as well early on about, can you create a SharePoint site to show in Teams? You kind of, don't you create, if you create the SharePoint site and then create your team based on the SharePoint site in Teams, that's how you would do that, isn't it?
You can do it both ways. So if you go to create a team in Teams, that will then make a SharePoint site, and then there is an open SharePoint site option within Teams itself.
Brilliant. One other, let's pick one other of these, and then we need to crack back on to keep people moving. So can you assign different folders to specific members of, for instance, within one SharePoint site, can you have different permissions for folders within that, or is it per SharePoint site?
Yes, you can. What I'll do is when we start back and we've done the list, I'll show them the permission side of things, that we can do it on the site level, even down to a file or a folder level.
Brilliant. And I've also noticed someone's mentioned the screen's blurry again. I'm just going to reshare my screen without sound, and that should solve the blurriness, hopefully. I'm going to leave some of the other questions there because we might answer them as we go along with the next section. But I'm just going to pass back over to Mark then. Do you want to take the next bit?
Yeah, certainly. Also, just on the screen issue, guys, we have had feedback that watching it back via the video, the screen is a bit clearer on that. It's a lot for your computer to handle with the streaming and everything. And because there's so many people connected at the moment, that may affect the quality of the picture.
Yeah, I'll turn that recording.
We've looked at document libraries, and they're really good for you to put files into, but sometimes you might want to capture data off people. So within SharePoint, you can create what's called a SharePoint list. And it starts really simply. So someone who is an owner of the site can go to the main homepage, press on new, and they can create a list. They can give it a title, give it a description, and it will create a single field. So it's a bit like in Excel, having a blank spreadsheet and putting a title for a column in. But when you've created your SharePoint list, not only are you putting a title in of what the column contains, you're also telling it the type of data that can go in. So if you look on the screen now, if If I was to add another column, I can put different types of text fields in, a number field, a yes, no, a person, a date, and a time. Now, if anyone is working with remote users that are only accessing this through, say, an iPad or a tablet or a phone, accessing a Excel spreadsheet on a phone and trying to do stuff on it is not a pleasant experience. With these SharePoint lists, when I press the new button, we actually get a form that gets filled in. And we can even set up mandatory fields. So the annoying thing I've had before now with Excel is I've put all these columns in that I want people to fill in. I get the data back and half of them are empty. With this, if they haven't filled those in, they would then have to go back and fill them in to complete that fault log in this case. So Ben, do you want to put a new fault in?
Why not? So let's put the fault as messed up the PowerPoint at start of the presentation. So I'll own up to that. This was a service issue. It happened today.
Yeah.
And there's been no repair to that at the moment.
Okay.
What are you going to do, Mark?
So if you save that now, I'll save that now. That then goes into my list. Now, just like we did for the documents, we can go to the three dots at the top and we can set alerts up. So if I'm managing this particular list, I can have alerts to when people have put new things in. Now, I can take this data and I can actually export it into Excel and it goes out into a table format. And the file that it creates is a live link to that data source. So moving forward, I can open the Excel spreadsheet, press refresh, and it will show me the data that's there at this moment in time. So if there's been new things added since I created the Excel spreadsheet, they would appear in the spreadsheet. It doesn't work the other way around, unfortunately. So you can't add new things to the list by adding a new row onto the Excel spreadsheet. But it's good if you want to have like a nice dashboard showing you the status of things.
And surely I'm kind of going off book here a little bit, but does this feed into things like Power BI? And could you pull this? I mean, I do a lot of stuff in Access. Can you pull it down into Excel as a data source that live refreshes?
Yeah, you can link the SharePoint list actually to Access. So you can do where you traditionally would have done a front end, back end database with it all being to Access files. The front end can be your Access with all your queries and reports in, and the back end can be SharePoint. So we've actually built something for someone where, you know, an internal training log, so they know what training rooms are being used on what days, and the person who's the training manager, they can actually access the data and see it in a calendar format just from their phone. So they can be out and about and know if there's a training room free for someone to use, or even meeting rooms. So we've done one for that where this actually is the booking a meeting room. Someone can pick the phone up and just see really quickly what meeting rooms are free.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this is sort of nice, easy development of. I mean, aside from doing the training, I've got years and years of hammering away on Access, building bespoke systems for small to medium-sized companies. And yes, this doesn't do everything you're going to want to do in a database, but the functionalities in basically it's a CRUD list, isn't it? We've got a create, edit, update. List with a nice form that's auto-generated. You can filter it, and most people's needs for logging and reporting and recording are kind of served by this, and it's just there ready to go, and anyone can do it, really.
Yeah, we can even make, so if I did like piping now, it should take it down to one record. I can actually save that filter that I've just put in as a new view. Brilliant. So if I just call that piping issues. Now the default is that's a public view, so everyone who accesses this SharePoint site would be able to use that piping view. If I untick that box, that's a view just for me. So now I'm just looking at piping issues. I can go back to all documents to really quickly switch between seeing just piping or just seeing everything.
Yeah, it's like a stored view, really, isn't it? A stored filter set.
Now, the beauty with this over Excel is if multiple people press the new button at the same time, it's not a problem. Whereas with Excel, because it's coordinate based, potentially we could have people overtyping each other.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. And that's important. A lot of places we do a lot of Excel training, and people are just getting used to this idea of Office 365, online working, collaborative stuff, and they're generally speaking, people are familiar with Excel. Oh God, what do they call it? Share Excel file. You tick the box, and it is called share. And you can open an Excel file with multiple users, but oh my God, it's horrendous. If you're not using something like SharePoint or OneDrive to do it, it breaks so easily. Whereas this is it's multi-user out of the box.
It is, and we can add, if on a more advanced level, we can add automation with workflows in. So depending on what fault area was chosen, an email can be generated to send to specific people. So where I just did the really basic, I get an alert because there's been a new one added. It could be a targeted alert to a specific person because it's a production or a piping a fault that's been put in.
Yeah, brilliant. Smashing. I know we've got a few questions stacked up. They're covering different areas. Have you got much more you want to talk about with lists, Mark?
No, that was it with lists. So we can go to some questions if you want.
Brilliant. So let's have a quick look if there are any list related questions. Do you want to have a quick scan down the Q&As, Mark? Anything that's not list, we'll leave till the end. We'll do permissions and then kind of mop up a few at the end that are sort of from older stuff.
David's asked, can the form be shared? So the form can be shared with external people. So you can set it up to add guests in that they can actually go on and see the information that's put in and even add more information in. Brilliant. And is now the point you would talk about any kind of approval at all, or am I sort of going off book there? So going back to the document library, one of the big things that this gives you over a traditional network drive is the fact that we can set up approval. So I've previously set up approval on this particular document library, and that's using this thing called flows. And what this now does is when someone uploads a file to this document library, it sets it to a status of pending. So at that particular point, the only people who can see that file are the person who uploaded it and the designated approvers. And then anyone who is an approver will receive an email. Do you want to show them that email, Ben?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second.
Whilst Ben's finding that, I know I've had quite a few conversations with people wanting to look at processes they have internally. So like a holiday request form. So within SharePoint, you're able to, somebody can actually put a request for a holiday, and then that can actually then go to their manager to get approval. And when they approve it, then that can actually then go on to HR or make changes in the diary. So it's really, with SharePoint, if you go back to that analogy of using Lego, it's a case of just really thinking about what things can you actually do to try and improve your processes and become more efficient.
Yeah, so Ben's got this email up here for the approval. If he was to click on the link that's in the email there, it takes him to that file, and then he can choose to either approve or reject it.
Yeah,
and it becomes live for everyone. If he rejects it, the person who uploaded it will get an email back telling them it's been declined, and it will gives Ben the ability to put a reason why it's been declined in as well.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's got sort of compliance issues and say maybe ISO accreditation, where they've got to show for policies and procedures why things have changed and when they were changed, this is ideal.
Brilliant. And just to touch on, I brought this up because it was a question in the Q&A, which I've marked that we're answering. That's managed through Flow, isn't it? And the one you've done is reasonably simple, but you can build really complex approvals, can't you, using Flow?
There's lots of flows which are sort of pre-built, where you literally just go and change a few settings. Do you see your flows, Ben?
I mean, just while we're waiting for that to load, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong here, Flow, we're talking about Flow in terms of SharePoint, but Flow, it's just open on another tab up here, Mark. I'll just go and...
Yeah, I've just moved that back so that it gives me the document library that we can see.
Oh, right. Sorry, mate. So flows are not just SharePoint. It's a way of stitching together and connecting and integrating all different...
Binds all the Office 365 applications and also a lot of external pieces of software too.
Yeah. So you could get it to, for instance, let's say you were wanting to keep an eye on someone's Twitter feed. If one particular Twitter user mentioned a particular hashtag or phrase, you get it to watch their Twitter feed and it will copy and paste that tweet into an Excel file in a SharePoint, SharePoint library. So it's not just what we're talking about. This is kind of pretty much anything you're going to want to do in terms of integrating things, isn't it?
It is. So where's my one gone? I can't see my approval one. Bear with me a second.
Well, I'm logged in. It's logged in as me, though, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah. Yes. So because I created it, it won't show there, but it would have shown here. And they are very sort of simple to do. You pick the one that you want, press create, and then there'll be boxes that you change. Like so, on the approval one, I had to choose the SharePoint site and the document library. I then had to choose who are my approvers. I then had to choose what the body of the email is going to contain, and then give it a test, and then away it goes. It works pretty much out of the box.
Brilliant. No, it's really good. It is powerful. That it's underutilized, I think, as well. I don't think people know it's there. It's mega clever what it can do. Is now a good point to start talking about permissions? Would we say, Mark?
Yeah. So earlier on, we were talking about permissions. There are several places that you can set permissions at. The base one was the SharePoint site itself. So as the person who created the site, I can go up here and I can add additional members in. So I've added in Ben, the other Ben, and Ed. We can set permissions up at a document library level. So I can, at this document library, I can go press the three dots, go into library settings. And again, within here, there is a permissions option, which I can't see for looking at the moment. So advanced settings, and then I would go into permission from there. And then also on the individual documents themselves, I can go in and I can manage access to those documents and folders there. So I can choose who can see those and who can't.
I mean, I suppose in principle, it gives you similar sort of permissions to what you would have on a file share, but it
does.
It's quite a lot more accessible. The interface is nicer. And then on top of that, you've got your sharing permissions that could be managed on a per, file, whatever basis. So it's really quite flexible what you can do with that, isn't it?
So you can have an overriding permission for that site, but then certain elements of that site can then be locked down.
Brilliant. No, that's really, really good. Right. So I'm conscious I'm starting to see, in terms of attendance, I'm starting to see a little bit of a drop off. So I'm assuming that people obviously have allocated a certain amount of time. And I think my jibbing on, chatting away and holding Mark up has kind of kept us going a bit longer than we said we would. Have you, in terms of permissions, Mark, is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or do you think we should go and have a quick look at the questions and then look at wrapping up?
Have a look at the questions and then wrap up.
Brilliant, smashing. Ed, are there any questions that you want to mention, Ed?
I was muted. Nothing specific. Just a very quick one though. My wife has been recently sent home from to work from home, and I'm sure this is familiar to lots and lots of people. Her workplace has gone all in on SharePoint though. So in the old days, it would have been a case of actually we can't just send you home. We've got to set you up with Citrix or some sort of special dongle to get into the server drive and all this kind of stuff. Whereas because they're all in on Citrix, it's just a case of grab your computer, get your CPU, get your monitors, stick them in the boot of your car, plug them in at home, log into Outlook, log into SharePoint, and you're good to go. And they've got a nice little website set up. It's got like the account section, the human resources section. They've got annual leave request forms on there and all this kind of stuff, all nicely set up on the SharePoint site. Looks beautiful. And she's off, and they've got no problems. They just sent everyone home and then cracked on from there. Of course, she works in travel, so no one's got any work to do, but that's a different story.
Similar. That sounds like she's probably got her company's got on-premises SharePoint by the signs of it. If they're doing it through Citrix,
No, they didn't need to do it through Citrix. That's the point.
Oh, sorry, I missed. Ignore me. So yeah, no, really good point. You'd sort of, if you've moved to this using SharePoint, you're ready to go if you need to work anywhere, really, aren't you?
Yeah, that's the beauty. You can just pick your computer up and go. There should be no difference between being in the office or being at home when it comes to if it's set up correctly.
Brilliant. Let's have a quick look at some of these questions that are down here. Let's see if there's any that we can tick off. So right, so I'll just read this out. I've not sort of digested it. Colin Foster a little bit ago. So thinking of SharePoint sites, if you work with or support a number of clients, presumably you could set up a SharePoint site for each client to share documents, let them ask questions, raise support tickets, etc. So I suppose he's asking, can you set up a client portal using SharePoint?
Yes, you can, because once you've set the SharePoint site up, if I went into the more advanced permissions, so if I went into the site permissions there, you can then add people in as site owners, members and visitors, so you can choose what permission levels people get, and you can then tweak you can make your own groups up, add clients in, and give them the ability to upload files and change things, or just simply look at what's already there.
It's great. I mean, this is what I suppose you'd back in the day call an extranet, wouldn't it? Really,
yeah.
And the fact you could have your SharePoint site hooking into a Teams, a Microsoft Team, and then you could have a document library that's shared in Teams, but also goes on the intranet and also the extranet if you set it up. The public facing. I mean, this is some mega slick stuff, really. If you put the time into it and decide what you want to do. I'm just going to add one other bit of a slightly different question. Haley asks, in the past, I've tried to share password-protected documents to external users through SharePoint, and it didn't work because the file was encrypted. Do you know if this is now possible?
It is. One of the options that you get if you're sharing externally, there is anyone with the link option, and by default now it adds a password to the file. So sharing with passwords is fine.
Brilliant. Here we go. Data storage. Right, here we go. There's got an Excel related question from Duncan. How does the new storage structure impact upon embedded links in Excel sheets? And this, if you've got a lot of stuff where you're linking things up, this could be a bit of a minefield, really. Can you comment on that, Mark?
It's not as good as direct linking to a file structure, but if you've got it set up the way that Quinton said, you would still be able to link to the physical network drive versions, and they would then be backed up into Office 365.
Yeah, I've noticed that it kind of creates a web link version of, and it works and it doesn't work. The offline version of Excel isn't really, it does it, but it's not really been designed for that.
That's really where what Quinton said, giving you the best of both worlds, it's an improvement over what you've got just with traditional cloud storage.
Yeah, no, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. So the answer to that is kind of yes, but no.
Yes, but it's how you've got it set up that will make it a yes.
Yeah. If you've got lots and lots of files all linked together, then you might have to do some work in going to edit links and then just changing exactly where they.
Correct, Ed. Correct.
Yeah, because it's not gonna roll downhill. If you moved to SharePoint on Tuesday and all your files were linked on Monday offline, you copy and paste it without opening those files. It won't update those and change those links to the new storage. No. So yeah. I think one last question from the bank here, and then we'll do a bit of a wrap up. Otherwise, we'll be keeping everyone here forever. This is quite a good one. Is there a data storage limit? And this is probably going to involve Quinton and Mark to answer.
There is and there isn't. There is a default storage level for each SharePoint site, but that can actually be tweaked by admin, so it can be increased. Microsoft are selling increased storage capacities for companies at ridiculously cheap amounts. So if you were reaching your limit as a company, it can be increased just by buying an extra storage. and it's to do with the number of people you've got on your tenant, the amount of things that you get by default. Quinton will know better than me, though.
Is it percentage of a terabyte times by something daft like that? How many users you've got?
Yeah, something on that scale.
Yeah, the thing that so there's terabytes of storage that's available. So yeah, just reach out to us and let us know what you wanted to do, and we'll advise you the best way of actually achieving that. One thing I'd like to add to is that on OneDrive there is a tremendous amount of storage, but OneDrive is designed really for single user.
Yeah.
If you start sharing things with OneDrive to lots of people, I've experienced lots of synchronization issues, etc. And SharePoint is designed from the ground up for a multi-user environment. So you've got to be very, very careful about how you use things. SharePoint is really used for collaboration, multiple people to be using, and OneDrive is, including the title, it's one single person.
Yeah.
Brilliant. No, smashing. Look, is there anything? I'm going to go for a couple of bits, sort of housekeeping bits, what we're going to send you, and mention something that we've been putting together in addition to these webinars that might help you. But before I sort of go through that spiel, is there anything anyone wants to add, on the panel? Anyone who's got a question or anything they want to sort of voice for the audience?
No, I'm good.
Smash in.
Well, if anybody wants having a reality check on the licensing, just please reach out and see what we can do, and ensuring that you have the right licensing, because it is a minefield with Microsoft 365 licensing. There's so many options and variables. Just reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do and try and save you some money.
Yeah, no, definitely.
To an expert on that, because there's hundreds of variations of the different Microsoft licenses. Oh,
it's a pain. It's a pain. I mean, even just setting up our training licenses for our business it's a nightmare. Do take Quinton up on this. There's his contact details. I'll include them in the email that we send out with the recording on as well, so you've got that. So a couple of last little things to sort of mention to you. Something that's going to be useful to you is we have set up a website called remoteheroes.co.uk, which we are putting recordings of webinars we've done on. So can you see there's a Microsoft Teams webinar on there? I also, and I'll include a link to this, and more content will go on it as we go through. I also had a chat with one of my old dear friends from university, a chap called Abdullah Mia, Dr. Abdullah Mia, and he's a consultant clinical psychologist, and it was really, excuse my sort of weird face there, but it was a really sort of frank chat about working from home and how that can impact upon you, and there's some really useful tools and techniques in there. So I'll include a link to that as well, so that you can have a little bit of a look at that. And for anyone who mentioned the Teams webinars that they missed, can you see there, we've got a webinar we did recently, and we've got one we did a year ago, so you can watch them whenever you want. I'll include a link on there as well. I want to thank all of the panelists for all the effort they've put in. I want to thank everyone who's attended, and especially those people who have hung on past the point of, maybe half an hour ago we said we were going to finish, so I really appreciate you sticking in there. We will send that recording, like I said. One thing to ask, if you have liked the session, please feel free to leave a Google review. I will send you a link and sort of some instructions of how to do that on the email that I send out to you. But yeah, no, from everyone at Woodthorpe IT and also Thai Data, I'd like to say a very big thank you for you to attending, and hopefully we'll see you on another webinar. And if you could all stay safe and look after yourself, that'd be brilliant. Hopefully all have a great day and enjoy the sun.